I'll come to you first.
Okay, and the thing I think to think about negotiation is quite often people think that it's like a battle, and it's something that there's only winners and losers, and if you don't win, then you're a loser. But that's not true, and I think it's important to kind of remember that it's a conversation, and so when you're approaching any kind of negotiation, whether it's at work or at home, I think it's important to kind of see it as a starting point. You know, you kind of will have something that's your end goal, so that might be, you know, a pay rise or to get a reduction in something. But it doesn't have to be about having a battle or drawing a battle line and saying, this is the line and I will not cross it and I won't budge until I get X, Y, Z, because I think that makes it very confrontational, and then it makes it very all or nothing. And when you're in that all or nothing mode, I think it can cause you to kind of make mistakes in your negotiation. So my main tip is to think of it as a conversation. It might be the first of many, it might be the first of few, depending on how it goes, but it's all about, okay, I have this end goal and this is what I'd like to reach, but there may be steps to get there. And also, you know, you might not get what you want first time round, and that can be a bit of a bummer. But I think there's lessons that you learn at each stage that you eventually will get better at it, smarter at it. You get better at reading cues or thinking outside of the box, maybe things that you hadn't considered, because it's not just about you, it's about the other person. So you're kind of looking for that win-win. So it's not about, you know, having a battle and drawing lines. It's kind of thinking, okay, well, this is what I want, but what would they want as well, and how can I paint it in a good picture? And if I don't get it this time, I've had a practice, I've had a go, I could get it next time or the time after. So that's mine. And I say that as a parent of a 4-year-old, so I've been there.
That's a really interesting. Before we move on, we can't now ignore the negotiations that you've probably had with your 4-year-old. Any particular styles or tips that have worked for you?
With 4-year-old?
Yes.
Okay. My main tip with my 4-year-old is kind of letting him think that he's won something, but he hasn't really. So things around, you know, if he wants to wear a certain outfit or doesn't want to eat certain foods, you know, he'll be like, I don't want to wear this, and I'll say, right, well, you can wear these trousers or these trousers. They're your options. And it kind of makes him feel like, oh, I have a choice, but he hasn't really. He's got a choice of 2. One of them is the one that I wanted anyway. And generally he goes, what I want. So, no, he doesn't. Yeah, so it's about kind of, you know, again, it's that win-win. Like, okay, yes, I want him to wear these trousers, but I'll let him choose out of 2 rather than out of 25. So, yeah.
Cool. Thank you. I will come down the line. So, yeah, that's an interesting one is, so don't make it a battle. Which I think is a really key takeaway. But also you're kind of considering the other person in that what does the 4-year-old want? The 4-year-old wants a little bit of choice and a little bit of power and a little bit of control over that decision as well. And so there's some limited options. There's some limited options that also benefit you at the end of that as well. So yeah, great example. Thank you. Okay, Ben, we're coming to you.
I think when it comes to negotiation, there are a lot of things you need to consider. And I'm speaking from the frame of mind of talking to employers or potential employers. And often, from personal experience, it's been a case of what am I willing to sacrifice in order to get to where I want, but also how do I manage my self-value versus what they're valuing me at. And I find it quite difficult to step out of that and start thinking, right, I need to be able to position this in a way that clearly defines my skill set, and if they're offering me something lower, why I deserve something higher, or if it's flexibility, why I need that flexibility and that kind of thing. So for me, it goes to the drawing board of like even applying for that job in the first place. What is it that I'm looking for in this, and why am I applying? And when it comes to the offer, what is it that I'm willing to sacrifice and what am I willing to push for? Because that's when you're going to know how to negotiate it. If you have quite strong ideas of what you want, but being flexible in what you give and take, I think that's what works best.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll just summarise that because that was cool. So, kind of some prep beforehand is useful. So, instead of kind of marching in and saying, this is my list and I'm not going to budge, which kind of comes back to don't make it a battle as well, because that would be tough. So, what things going into that conversation might you be prepared to kind of flex on or sacrifice, or but then also what's really, really important to you that you might not want to sacrifice either. So some prep and some kind of clarity in your own mind about what you're trying to get out of those conversations. Thank you. Catherine, stretch down.
Yeah, so I started thinking about negotiating a few days ago, and at first I just thought, oh, I don't ever really negotiate. And then the more I thought about it, I just realised I negotiate all the time. Like, as a freelancer, everything that you do is a negotiation. So from when you decide, oh, I think it would be a really good idea to quit my job and be a freelancer, you have to pretty much make up your business from nothing. So that was really hard. And one of the biggest obstacles that I had to overcome was like the idea of setting rates and actually thinking of a thing to sell and how much that should cost and if anyone will pay that, and being really terrified to talk to people about money, which obviously not all negotiating is about money, but it is very much for me a lot of the time. And especially as a woman, I think that's quite a difficult topic to think of talking about. So just to build on like what the others said, I definitely agree that it's not about battling, and it's very much about doing your research beforehand and just avoiding any kind of scenario that would be like wearing a suit in a boardroom and being very serious. Like, I've never done that. All I ever do is talk to people on the phone or email them, and it's all negotiating, but you mainly have to listen to what other people want, to get out of the negotiation, because like Michelle said, it isn't a battle. So yeah, that's pretty much how I do it. And also just like researching your industry as well, and just kind of, if you're set as a freelancer, if you set your rate, you can't just pick a number out of the air. There are going rates for certain types of works and just so many variables, and just the more prepared you are, the better it will be. So that's pretty much my advice about negotiating.
Thank you. So some top tips there. I took away from that summary that everything's a negotiation, which kind of made me feel a bit sad. But also, you touched on a really good point, because actually we are primarily kind of focused here on kind of business aspects. But to go back to the example of the negotiation with a 4-year-old, actually we do all negotiate on a day-to-day basis, whether it's in work or in business or just in general life, whether it's over your garden fence with your neighbour or with your 4-year-old child. And I'm just wondering, is there, because it can be really daunting, particularly if it's something very important in terms of things that are important to you in terms of salary or fees or something to do with work and your employer, which can be a daunting experience. Is there anything that you can think, I'm thinking more of kind of where you could practice this a little bit, like if you have a 4-year-old child at home, that you could kind of try some of these styles or tips somewhere else in a different context that might be a good environment to try it. Have you got any stories or any advice for what's worked for you or what's gone really bad, and what you wouldn't do again? And it could be in a business setting, that's cool, but I don't think it necessarily has to be, because I think you could try some of this out in a different environment to kind of see what works for you and what you can kind of be true to yourself, but also kind of achieve the results that you're looking for as well. Have you got any kind of advice on any of that?
So kind of car boot sales situations where you need to haggle down a price is always a really good way of trying to figure out what you're comfortable with and how you can negotiate. That often is more a battle, because you're both very set on getting a good deal. But it's a really good way of building your confidence and just being able to talk openly about price and kind of push your limits. I often do that when I'm on holiday, and it's the kind of like flea market environment where you're forced into it almost. But it takes that's kind of, you're not in that situation every day. But I think there are a lot of hidden negotiations that we forget about every day. So whether it's negotiating with yourself whether you go to the gym after work or what time you get up in the morning or whether you go out for drinks instead, and like all of these things are negotiations, and you're always trying to weigh up options for good and bad and figuring out what's best for yourself. And I think if you start practicing it within yourself and trying to do what's going to make you happiest, then you end up doing the right thing.
I have an idea. I don't know if this is that ethical, but I personally wouldn't do it. But my boyfriend's dad, apparently, every time he buys something, like, and talks to a company, he always says, "What will we give you for free? Like, do you do any deals?" So that could be a good way of just trying to get your confidence up with, like, bartering with people.
I have actually heard that one before. Yeah, that you should just ask. People don't ask often enough, and people are usually quite surprised as to what they get. I did have one, but it's gone now. Remember now. When you were saying about practicing, I was thinking, practicing. But just like your household bills, you pay for services every day, and I've got one. Virgin Media decided to put my bills up. They took away my loyalty customer discount, and I was like, well, I'm still a customer, I'm still loyal, so why have you taken the discount off? And then they were like, oh, they gave all these reasons, and I was like, but I'm still a loyal customer, so what are you going to do about it? So they took some money off. So I was happy about that, and I was a bit annoyed about the fact that I had to do this every year. I was just thinking, but if I was new, you'd give me everything under the sun. But that's an example. So even your household bills, you could probably go through and see what you're paying for, how long you've been a customer, and ask and just say, well, Sky said they'll give me this. What are you going to give me?
Nice. Good tips. We can all do that because we all need to get involved in those negotiations. One other point that I didn't touch on that Catherine mentioned was about the importance of listening, which I thought was a good key takeaway. So just to kind of summarise that, the listening to kind of what the other person or parties is kind of is, and I'm really listening rather than just kind of preparing when you're going to jump in and say, no, I'm not having that. And so the importance of effective listening, and I guess then just being able to kind of step back and think, okay, are we battling over a point just for the sake of battling over that one thing? Do we really care about it that much? Or is there another way to resolve this? Can we get creative? And is there a win-win that both parties could take away? I was just wondering if any of the panel, before we kind of open it up a little bit, are there any kind of stories that you want to share where you just kind of smashed it and you were like, do you know what, I went in there and tried this and it worked and I was really proud, and it can be the smallest thing. It could be, quick win over the 4-year-old's outfit that day, something that kind of worked for you and you got a relatively good outcome. Anyone want to share anything?
It might not be a win in the sense that you think it's a win, but today somebody asked me to do some work for them, and I have done work for them before, and I asked them how much they were going to pay me, and it was way too low. And I was thinking, well, I did some work for them last year at the same rate, but things are different. So obviously I'm on my money journey like everybody else. So I was thinking, well, I'm going to talk about negotiating tonight, so maybe I should try it. And so I was like, thank you for that, but my rate is now this. So there it is. Kind regards, Michelle. But I did talk to a friend about this first before I just went in, and she was like, you don't have to explain, you just have to say that this is your rate. And I expected them to come back and say no, and they did, which is fine. But she wrote me like a really long email, a breakdown of all her costs, etc. And then I felt really bad. But then I kind of was like, okay, there's a lesson in here. And so I was looking at it going, well, maybe she's just priced herself too low if she's not making much of a profit, which is why she wasn't going to pay me very much. So I just said, okay, thank you for letting me know that. I wish you all the best. And just kind of left it at that. And I think it's taken me up till now to kind of feel okay with it, but I know that I had to do it because if I didn't, and I took that work on, I would feel really resentful that I didn't feel that I was getting paid enough for what I was doing. And so I've tried to be a bit emotionless about it. Emotionless is not the right word. But I try to detach my emotions from it. And so, so that wasn't negotiating. But it was just about me kind of saying, okay, this is what I think I'm worth, and that's too low for me, so I'm not going to do it.
So this isn't an example of anything I've negotiated, but it's leading on from that. And it's about how we do value ourselves and the work that we're doing. And I think one of the most important points, so to give an anecdote, my first job out of uni, I was barely getting paid minimum wage, but doing probably 5 roles within a startup agency, and was massively undervalued. And it wasn't that I went for another job and got offered almost 10 grand more than what they were paying me, that I was like, oh, right, so this isn't right. Something's gone horribly wrong here. That I realised what my self-worth was. And I think it's when that happens that you do need to start pushing up your value and realising the potential and not letting people undercut it. And it is that thing of not having to validate why you are worth a certain amount. This is because I provide a really good service, and this is why you should pay that for me. And if they do ask questions, you have the evidence and justification for it, but it's not just come out of nowhere, it's because you're doing good things. So yeah, it just backs that up. Yeah.
I can tell a story. Yeah, I definitely identify with both those stories. I have like so many rejections from people that I can't even count. Like, I've just become desensitized to the amount of times I get rejected a day. But it's always really good when you actually get a good deal with someone. But one really stressful thing that I had to overcome when I was more new to freelancing, I'm not that experienced to be honest, but in the earliest days, one of my clients I wrote something for them, they thought that wasn't really what they wanted. So they said, let's just stop this and move on, i.e. not pay me for the time I'd already done. But they were actually a really good client, and I didn't want to like lose them by just being like, no, you must pay me, and getting in an argument. So I just kind of got really panicked, and then had this inspiration to just say, oh, well, but what if we change it to, I was like, I've got expertise in all these other things, and I can give you this structure of how could we do it. And they were like, oh, okay, let's hear it. And I was really shocked that they would actually be open to me just prepare. So I think that's a really important thing about all negotiating, is always offering other people something that they could benefit from, because then they don't feel like they've lost, even if maybe secretly they are. But yeah, that's what I think.
Thank you. I think there's a lot of kind of alignment in terms of like little tips that kind of work in different ways, but I feel like we could have a wall with like negotiation tips. That blank wall over there looks like it needs filling. Anyway, one thing I just wanted to pick up on was actually, Michelle, you prompted a thought, which was when you kind of sent that email that just kind of said, actually, this is the rate, kind regards. And it just prompted a discussion that I was involved in recently about kind of and I think women do tend to do this more than men, is I'm really sorry, but my rate is actually, and so could I just, and actually I was thinking that was a great email you sent, because you stood your ground and you weren't apologetic for anything, and I think this is relevant to negotiation, because just removing some of those key words sometimes from the conversation or from the email. It's not about kind of being aggressive or rude. It's about, this is my position, and actually I'm not sorry for it. And so those kind of keywords of just, which I do all the time. I'm just emailing. Can I just say, or sorry to interrupt. And it's that's a hard thing to do. So I would have to kind of practice that somewhere else before I did it. But I think it's a long-term change, but something that is also relevant to this conversation. So thank you for prompting that thought. Okay, I think we probably want to open up. I'm interested to hear questions, thoughts, stories, advice, tips from anyone here. And we've got people dialed in as well.
Yeah, we have a first question actually from London.
Amazing.
And they've said, how do you negotiate with someone that has an aggressive style?
You look like you know. Help us with
it. So I've negotiated quite a lot with people that are aggressive, and I'm so not aggressive, it's ridiculous. But I think I step into that. I'm not going to apologise. I am going to justify why I deserve this and why it's worth fighting for. Like, I'm not just going to concede, but that's when the give and take comes in. So I look to my list of priorities and think, these are what I'm not going to budge on. These are what I don't mind. As long as I get this minimum list, then I've achieved something. I think calling people out on aggression is often quite a good thing. So I once got called sweetheart and darling when I was trying to negotiate, which I was not happy about. And I just said, I don't think you should be speaking to me like that, because I'm not a sweetheart and I'm not your darling. This is a professional environment and you wouldn't do that to a colleague. And that often makes people realise that they've stepped into a role that they probably, or a personality trait that they didn't realise they were doing. So having kind of your feet on the ground and taking note of what's going on and actively listening to the conversation to pick up on these things can make a huge difference in how you can then respond and negotiate back.
Yeah, anyone else want to jump in or any experience of that? I think that's a really good question, because I think that's a really stressful environment as well, and when you're trying to negotiate on top of that. And so maybe it's small steps as well as to get to that place where you're kind of bold enough to call things out is often a journey, but maybe it's just calling one thing out quietly, see what happens, or not, and just calling one thing and see what reaction you get, and over time you build your confidence to do it. So yeah.
I would also say, if this is a new position, or if in my instance it was speaking to someone that I was really working with, but it highlighted to me that it was an environment I didn't want to be a part of because of that aggressive person, that aggressive trait. So I think it can often show you what you do and don't want to work with, and if you're in a negotiating position, it often means you've got the upper hand in how you want that conversation to carry on. So I think that's important to bear in mind.
Oh, lots of questions. Gonna come to you, Emma. Yeah, I'll repeat. Okay. Ellie, I'll repeat.
If you're negotiating a deal with someone, do you think it's better to have half of the deal rather than none at all, or would you stand your ground and have nothing, all or nothing? If that makes sense.
Okay, so the question is, if you're negotiating a deal, is it good to get half of the deal instead of the whole thing you're looking for, or nothing at all, which is better? So I guess something or nothing or all. Anyone want to do that? Yeah.
I'm going to be really annoying and just say I don't really think there is half a deal, because everyone that goes into the negotiation, assuming maybe there's two parties, everyone has their minimum, like has been said, that they will take away with. And if you take away less than that, well, as Michelle said, you'll be working for less than you're worth, so you won't enjoy the work, you won't actually put in all the effort, and then everyone loses. So I would say it's always better than just to take nothing, because there is no such thing as half.
I think obviously you're going to be doing your prep, so you're going to be looking at what's your kind of baseline. But quite often, something I read is that whenever you're kind of trying to reach a goal, for example, so if it's a deal, a good way to look at it is to have what is good, what is best, and what is better. And so then when you're in your negotiation scenario, you'll be able to pick up where you're at, and if you've got kind of baselines as to, okay, well, this is a good deal, and how do you feel about it, then you'll know, and then you'll know if you're at better, or even if you're at best. And so, like Catherine said, it's not really half a deal, it's either a good deal, it's either the best deal or a better deal. That's how I try to look at things.
Thank you. So a strong theme around prep again, and just kind of what is the most important thing that you're not willing to back down on, and then kind of, oh, you don't tell them, you keep your cards close to your chest. Yeah. I think we'd be experts. Okay, question. Yeah.
I don't know if anybody has experienced this, but when women do that, they're considered bossy or very aggressive, and today you might get your deal, and tomorrow you might not get your deal. You might get a pay slip because somebody thinks you were too bossy or something. Um, I don't know. And when this kind of scenario happens, women start questioning back, saying, did I make a mistake? Or am I valuing myself more than what I am worth and everything? So I don't know. Is there a way? I mean, it seems like a vicious circle, and is there a way to overcome that kind of vicious circle?
Yeah, good question. So this question is, um, occasionally or frequently, women can be told that they're bossy if they are negotiating with a particular style. Which kind of comes back a little bit to the earlier point around language as well. And so any kind of tips, advice how to overcome those situations where you are told that you're being bossy, and have you then over kind of valued your position, and then it kind of knocks your confidence, I guess, sometimes. So how do you keep your confidence high, and stick to your guns? Any tips, advice on it?
I think for those situations, it's important to surround yourself with good people, because it's very easy to go into kind of that negotiating scenario and invest so much emotion into it that when you get rejected or you're told you're bossy or whatever, you start to question yourself. But the reality is that it's never about you. And I think if you surround yourself with good people that you can talk about it with afterwards, they will remind you that that's about that person. And also, I think it's a really easy put down for women. So it's an easy one for people to just sling out there to just completely throw you. But don't let it derail you. And also, I also think that I would say that successful negotiators have had lots of knockbacks as well, but they get up and they keep doing it, and they get better at it, and because they're practicing essentially, and they probably got good people around them, or they surround themselves with people who are kind of like-minded. They keep going and they get to where they want to go. But I think it's very easy for us to internalize that one boss was really bad to you and made you feel rubbish and made you feel, have really so low self-esteem, and it's easy to kind of carry that around with you for a long time. I know that I did in previous employment. So it's important, it's easy to say, but not to take it personal, because it isn't. That person isn't losing sleep over what they said to you that day. So if you can, you shouldn't give them that as well. And a key to that is to have good people with you. People that you can talk to and say honestly how you feel, and they'll critique what maybe you could have done better, but it's never going to be that you asked for too much, because if you think that you're worth it, then you've usually got good reason to back it up. But again, it's the whole mindset thing, because you believe it. It's you're trying to get through to other people to believe it as well, and you might not get there first time around, but you got to keep trying. But in order to keep trying, you need to have good people around you, I think.
I add something actually. I definitely agree with all those points, and just to add on, I think that it's not as easy as saying, oh well, if the environment you work in isn't supportive, you should just quit, because obviously everyone has commitments and it's not that easy. But if it is really that bad, where people are undermining you and making you feel uncomfortable for just being normal at work, like that's something to think about. But also, I think women being bossy in the workplace is a subject that's starting to get like research in it, where women are expected to be more like meant to be nicer, whatever that means. And I think maybe sometimes they could be perceived as bossy because they might just feel on edge and nervous that they don't feel that they can justify to themselves to stand their ground. But I think if you have good mental health and well-being, and you are being your authentic self, like the right people will hear what you're saying and kind of connect with it. So it's a bit of a wishy-washy way of saying just like stay grounded and connected.
I completely agree, and I think we're, as women, being told you're bossy is we take it negatively as well, and it doesn't need to be. But there's nothing wrong with being assertive and trying to do what you think is right in your position. It's that kind of thing. One person's bossy is another person's assertive, and it's so dependent on who's saying it and how they say it, that we, as completely generalising here, but we as women will take it negatively, and it really doesn't need to be that way. So I think it's staying grounded, it's staying connected, and it's thinking about how you feel in that situation, and what you can then do to make it better without changing key elements of your personality to suit the workplace.
Just one other point, and I think the key thing to remember is that the world of work and the workplace was never really designed for women. You know, obviously, traditionally, women stayed at home and men went to work, and so the way that work is structured is not really made for us. And obviously, this is why we're in a situation where we have flexible working and pregnancy rights, etc. Because the structure that is very 50 structure, and we're trying to kind of mould it to suit what we need. And so it's almost like we're trying to play a man's game, and having the word bossy thrown at us negatively is kind of like, well, that's a game that I'm always going to lose. And so, like everyone said, it's about kind of trying to be your authentic self and surround yourself with good people to try and navigate that, I guess.
And I completely agree. So I got really excited because I remembered something. And it's important to remember that the word bossy is rooted in boss. So by turning it into something negative, you're taking it away from what it's really there to represent. And it's that you're in control and you're being able to assert what you think is right at work. And that the reason I thought of that is because I saw an infographic today where it was on LinkedIn, and it was describing the perfect boss. And one of the characteristics on this infographic was he has a great moustache and a jaunty hat. I was like, excuse me, what happened to female bosses in this infographic? Like, do I have to grow a moustache to be able to be a boss? But that's the kind of thing that we're up against. It's like, it's not just a male world, and it's not just a male working environment anymore. We've got to think about how we adapt it not just to gender but to personality traits and everything that makes us different. So that's what we're trying to do through negotiation.
Yeah, thank you for that. So maybe there's something about being comfortable with our own style of bossy for a little while until things move into a much better place. So thank you for that. Question at the back.
Yeah. So there are a lot of websites that tell you the salary ranges, for example, for particular jobs. And obviously, especially I don't know, it always feels like you've got tons to learn. No matter how much you learn, you realize, oh my God, there's more than that. So I don't know, you keep feeling like you're in the beginning, even like 2 years, 3 years into a job. So how do you know when you should ask for more? Because not all the companies are open about salaries within the company. So if that kind of policy is in place, you can't really talk to colleagues, so you don't know what they're offering in the room. And then if you're just seeing, well, apparently in Manchester, this particular job, which is not a junior anymore, maybe I've gone beyond that, but it's also not necessarily a senior, it's a quite wide range of salary. How do you know where you're in that range?
Yeah, good question. So that's the question is around in the market. There's a lot of salary data, salary ranges for jobs, kind of market price on particular jobs, but it's really broad. And particularly in technology, you're always learning, so you're always kind of constantly striving for new information, new skills. And so how do you align and kind of map where you are at maybe a given point in time with skill set and experience and things like that, to a particular data point, and how does that work, so that you can then have that information to go in and help with negotiations. Anyone? That's a really interesting question. Anyone want to go?
Now, I'm glad you asked that question actually, because I always find it quite interesting that when people talk about negotiating, they always say, okay, go and do your market research and kind of look at the salary bands. And I was thinking about this the other day, and I was thinking, that's all well and good, but who says that you have to stick to the salary band? Because first of all, it's subjective in the sense of who puts out the data, and secondly, things change. So where there might be a job that is all the rage, that everyone's starting at 25,000, it could change tomorrow. And so I think in terms of deciding when you want to negotiate and how much you ask for when you kind of do your research and your data, I think it's good to have it as a benchmark, but don't limit yourself to what the data says, because you don't know where this data's come from, you don't know how old it is. And if you place too much emphasis on someone else's data, then you're almost perpetuating the cycle, and you're basically saying that is my bracket because someone else has told me that forever, when it doesn't necessarily have to be. So I think when you're thinking about maybe having that salary negotiation conversation, pick a number and see what feels good. You'll have a number that you just think too low. You'll have a number that's like, whoa, way too high. But you'll get to a point where you kind of think, well, actually, that feels good. And then obviously, it's going to be dependent on where you work and what you know about salary bands in the company that you work in. But I think it's good to start with what feels good, because normally when you're in negotiation, you can't negotiate up, it's usually down. So don't start too low and don't focus so much on the market data, because like I said, you don't know where it's come from, and you don't want to peg yourself based on data where you don't know where it's come from. So start with what feels good and work from there.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think testing it out with friends as well, and just trying to sound it out with people that either know the industry or have an idea or are in the same job but in a different company, and figure it out from there. I'd also never say that, I would be wary of saying that the ability to learn new things is a bad thing. I'd always say that that's a really strong strength, because I think it's quite a negative attribute if a really senior person goes into a job and says, I'm a senior person, I deserve 50k and I know everything, so it's done, that's it. I think that's quite a bad thing. I think if you can go in and say, well, actually, I'm at this price range and I know I've got a lot to learn, but I'm willing to learn on the job and put in the extra hours to get that skill, or this is my skill set and this is where I want to improve, but this is why I deserve more than this, because I can deliver this, this and this. It's really knowing what you're able to deliver and being comfortable with the wage that you're able to achieve, I think.
I actually find this really helpful, because when I had proper jobs, I never knew how to negotiate a salary. I was like, oh, I should be more feminist and like negotiate my salary, but I was like, I don't know how to do it. Do other people do it? And I think if you could divide the people who have jobs into maybe two sections. So when you're younger, you don't really need to negotiate your salary because you don't really know anything. You're not like, you're just trying to learn. But then obviously when you get to a certain point in your career, you do need to negotiate what you want to earn to be worth what you can offer. So I think once you pass into that stage, that's then the time to take on all these like really great tips. But I think I actually find it easier to do it with freelancing, to negotiate like what because similarly there are like averages in the market of what your service is worth. So you've obviously got to kind of do your research, but then you take into account like whether it's like business to business or business to customer. So similarly, like when you're going for your job, like Michelle said, pick a number that feels good to you. And definitely don't undersell, because you can never like add on money.
We're actually having this. I'm in a Mumsnet group on Facebook. It's my life. And the conversation of negotiation came up, and somebody is thinking about negotiating her salary because she's been given more responsibility. And one of my other friends piped up and said that she went into her negotiation and negotiated an extra £10,000. And what she did was she set out her skill set, what she has brought to the team, to the organisation, but then she added a few things that she'd noticed that wasn't being done in the office, and had offered to take on a little bit more responsibility. And they went for it. And so that's something to think about. So not just about the skills that you have now, but what additional things can you offer your line manager or employer that would benefit the business, because then it makes you look more favourable, and they're kind of more likely to go, oh, okay, yeah, all right then.
So we asked one online. We've got quite a few, so just to share the love.
Can I say one more to the question?
Just one more comment on that, yeah.
So I wanted to say something about market data versus actual data. The company I worked for before, I kind of thought, based on company data, I was paid all right. And then we got made redundant, the whole company went bust. And my teammates, who we had been doing the exact same job for the last 5 years, all told me that they were struggling to get interviews because they were told they were pricing themselves out of the market, and I couldn't fight them off fast enough. So there's a little moment where I was like, something's not right here. So I basically asked my colleagues, I promise I will never reveal this information, but this is why. Will you tell me what you earn, roughly? And I found out what 2 of my 4 other colleagues earned. And then I went to my boss and went, you don't need to tell me what they earn. Can you rank my team colleagues in who earns the most, who earns the nearest to me? And when I found out, actually, one of the people who told me was the next best paid person, who was being paid £27,000 a year more than me, so in my company. So I was like, that's an entire extra salary. So I kind of wanted to say, sometimes it's actually worth finding out sort of like what other people are like. ThoughtWorks is very open about it, but not other companies are. But so for that reason, I actually, like, if someone was to ask me now, what do you earn, I would give them a ballpark figure so they would know, because I was like, I would not want that to happen to somebody else.
Yeah, so just for those dialed in, I'll try and summarise that. So yeah, good point. Just to kind of extend that discussion was around the importance of external market data, but also trying to get some visibility around internal data as well. So kind of looking around, maybe speaking to colleagues and your employer to push for a little bit more visibility, because there's a story in the room around a previous employer that it wasn't until kind of a restructure and some redundancies were made that there became a kind of awareness of a huge discrepancy in terms of salary, like almost £30,000 between kind of one colleague and another. So kind of trying to push for, so it's the external and the internal that can be important as well, and getting some visibility around that. Thank you.
Can I add my comment to that? Because somebody wouldn't get this if that's okay. No, it's okay. I can shout mine. Just to kind of answer, just to tie into exactly what you said there, and some numbers for you. So this hopefully should give people a heuristic as to where you can put price yourself. At any moment in time, if you're in the upper earnings bracket, then replacing you will lose about 3 months worth of productivity. So you can expect the company to lose about 12k, give or take, in lost productivity. So whatever you're worth or you're being paid at this moment in time, you're worth 12k more than that. Just remember that's the first thing. And the real reason I know that is I had to negotiate, and I'm also negotiating with as an ex-employer as well as boss. If you are already under what the market data is saying, price yourself up to that point, because that's what they'll cost to replace you. And at 12k, because there's lost productivity there as well. So that's where you'll get this 27k discrepancy, because you're under the market point, and there's 12k to add to that. Yeah. Does that make sense? So that's actually kind of a reasonable rule of thumb you can actually use. And I have to sit on both sides of this fence, so just so we kind of have a number in our head, and we kind of know.
So just to summarise that tip, the tip was if you feel like you're under kind of market level, get yourself to market level and then add a bit more, because for employers, cost of replacement and time to hire can be pricey as well. So get yourself up and then add more. Thank you.
So just to go off Claire's point, do you think then that if you're a harder negotiator and if you're sort of pushier and you sort of more assertive when you ask for perhaps more money or more time off or whatever, that you're going to get results? Do you think that's more likely?
So the question is, do you think if you're a harder negotiator, which might mean better or not, but you're more pushy potentially, or just a great negotiator, that you get better results? Is that always the case?
I think if you ask, you're more likely to get. I think it's as simple as that. I know that there's been research done around the difference between men and women when they start jobs, and men are more likely to negotiate if there's a salary band and negotiate higher, and often they'll get it. But if you don't negotiate, the employer's not going to say, we're giving you the job, but you want an extra £3,000. They're not going to say it to you, so you have to ask for it. I don't know if you negotiate harder, you always get what you want, but I think it's about preparation and knowing the lay of the land. I think if you're smarter at it, you will. I don't know if harder or pushier will necessarily get you more negotiation, but if you don't ask, you definitely don't get.
Yeah, I'd agree. I don't necessarily know if harder makes a difference. I think it's really circumstantial and situational in how you are negotiating, and it goes back to how we were saying how you respond to someone that's an aggressive negotiator on the other side. Is it really depends on what you're willing to give and get and where you sit in that negotiation. I think, as Michelle said, if you don't ask, you don't get, and that's not being hard or pushy, that's just asking.
Yeah, I don't think you should ever be pushy because, as we were saying earlier, negotiating is kind of about people both leaving feeling like they got something that they wanted, and I think it's easy to cast the employer as like this demon that's out to just keep everything they can from you. But like this man at the front just said, you have a stronger case if you can sort of point out the benefit to giving you what you want, which could possibly be you not quitting. But if you're not too sure if they wouldn't mind that, then maybe don't use that. So yeah, that's my advice.
So I've got one online who has asked, I'll try and summarise, if you have one shot, so for example, a review. If you have one shot, how should you best prepare for that if you don't think there's going to be a back and forward? There's really very minimal amount of time that you can do that. If it's one time, one shot, what are the best practices to use?
Okay, so the question is, if it's one shot to try and negotiate something that you want, rather than kind of an opportunity to go many times for the same thing, what tips, advice to kind of prep for that one shot?
I think it's like give and take. So it's really knowing the work that you're doing and you're delivering, and why you then are justified to ask for more, and how you'll be able to show that justification as well. So it's just knowing inside and out, this is the skill set that I do at the moment, this is the additional things I could do, or these are things that I'm being asked in addition to what my original purpose was, and this is therefore why I deserve an extra day's holiday or an extra 3k or whatever it might be. I think it comes down to it does come down to that bam 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 bam, give me more kind of conversation. I from experience, that's what works best for me. But also bringing it back to how you feel as an employee in a review situation. So being able to have that extra trust or confidence that you've listened will help me as an employee be more confident and perform better because we've had this conversation.
I think also if you know that you only get one shot and that it's once a year, then your preparation is actually going to be throughout the year, because I think for you it would be useful to know either directly or in a roundabout way what would get you a pay rise. So what do you need to do in your job, in terms of, do you need to take on extra responsibilities, do you need to have extra skills, so what is it that would get you that, what do you know that your line manager is looking for or your employer is looking for, that would put them in the frame of mind of thinking, oh, okay, well, she's taken on this role, or she's offered to head this team, or whatever, and so yes, I feel good about giving a pay rise. But yeah, so if you know it's only once a year, then essentially you've got obviously if it's tomorrow, then it's a bit late, but you've got the time to be preparing for it rather than kind of thinking the day before. But also if you're having regular reviews, and that's the time to be asking, well, how do you think I'm progressing, what do I need to work on, and keep a diary, because it's really easy to forget all the stuff that you've been doing throughout the year, and then you have that panic the week before and you're like, I want to ask for an extra £5,000 but I can't remember what I've been doing for the past year. So if you can keep a diary of the performance review meetings that you've been having, or the extra work that you've been doing where you've shown initiative, when people have given you compliments on things that you've been doing, then you have a back catalogue and they can't say no.
Great tips. Great advice. I would just I'd extend just to pull out kind of I think all of you touched on it earlier, was around kind of if you surrounded yourself with people, just kind of a summary of utilising those people in your network. So sounding them out in advance in terms of kind of what you're planning on kind of talking about, maybe kind of rehearsing a little bit of that conversation, and then checking in afterwards if there was anything that kind of snowballed you during it, or just to say I think it went really well, is just a reminder on those points that you touched on earlier.
Can I just add on to this, because it's the review season that's going on in many other companies. This is one of the tips that I had got from somebody very senior. Find out in your company who's your peer group, which circle you belong to, what circle you belong to. Observe from them, and then when you go into that room where you have to negotiate or review yourself, where there's somebody's reviewing, you can tell them that this is what my peer group does, and I am doing this plus this, so I should be sat on a different circle now, or I should get more than this, which goes back to the same thing. This is what the market values this position, but I do much more than that, and hence I value myself here. The second thing that I had learned from the same person was that all year round you get a lot of appreciation and a lot of feedback from everybody, but it's only during the review cycle when you're like, oh no, I don't know where to get my feedbacks from and everything. This person actually made a folder in his workmate where he had like a long list of all the feedbacks all through the year. And when the review cycle used to come, he did the least homework because he used to just open that inbox and he's like, here's all the good things that I've heard. And everything that's good is a star mark. So you can see the number of star marks that I have got. So that's just some prep work that he did all through the year, which gave him confidence, because every time he could see the number of mails increasing in his folder, it just used to give him a boost a little bit.
Nice. So yeah, that was just an extension of that earlier points around. So the first one is understand your peer group, and the people that you're kind of operating at a similar level to. Understand, kind of observe, what is it that they kind of do, what level are they operating at, what skills do they demonstrate, what value do they add, and then bring that into your prep. So understand, observe, and then talk about kind of the things that you do that aligns with that group, and all the extra things that you do as well, that kind of aligns with what you're trying to achieve out of that conversation. And the second point was an extension from earlier of some advice that was once given around do your homework throughout the year. So as you're getting feedback or support for a piece of work, just pull it into one folder, and then you need to do the least prep ever for that kind of conversation, because you've got it all in one place. Sounds really easy, but probably 99% of us don't do it. But it's such good advice, is do it throughout the year, because it's so hard to go back and try and remember what you were doing 9 months ago and who you were working with and what the value was, and so get it all at the time and just drag it into one place.
We keep talking about preparing for the talk, but in some companies there aren't necessarily reviews, or like you would need to coach a lot to get a review, and then again it stops happening. How do you start the conversation if there's no conversation in place?
Great question. So this is actually, in some companies there aren't really reviews, so you don't have kind of you don't know when the opportunity to have that conversation might be. So how do you open the conversation if that's not kind of a formal structure that's in place and that opportunity isn't obvious? Any advice?
I think this whole discussion about having reviews is making me think about, so obviously being a freelancer is a bit different because you call all the shots. So if I want to have a review, I'll just tell someone we're having a review. I wouldn't do that though. But at work, I think everyone's just so confused about how it actually works, because obviously some people, if you work at a big company like Accenture or something, you'll have standard pay rises like every 3 months or whatever and be really jealous of your colleagues. But for the people that aren't really sure and don't have any information, I would say just try and find like a mentor at your office, someone that you think is more experienced than you, that could just give you informal advice about how to deal with these topics, because that sounds like the biggest problem is the lack of information.
Speaking from experience, where I've been in situations where the process hasn't been in place and people were just expected to kind of keep going at the same rate and not ever have a review because you're lucky, like the kind of you're lucky to have a job mentality. I just brought it up I went straight to the top and was like, I'm not happy with this, and it was really hard to do because it was again my first job out of uni, so I had no idea what I was doing, but I knew I wasn't happy with the way my contract was set up. So I just kind of took it to him and said, I don't know where I should be or what this should be, but I know it's not what I'm comfortable with at the moment, and just had an ongoing conversation from there. I think the hardest part was flagging it up, but Catherine was right. I had someone in the company that I talked to about it first, and that gave me advice on how to do that, and that was really important. But if it's not someone that's in your company, it can be a friend or someone at a networking event or someone that you can just bounce the idea off, because it's not even a face-to-face conversation. It's just sending that email of, I need to have a chat about this because I don't feel comfortable with X, Y, and Z, and that's usually enough for an employer to realise that they need to have a chat.
I think also it helps if you kind of understand the business cycle. So obviously there's going to be times of year that's you're not going to get the time to sit down with your manager to talk about pay reviews. So if you can pick a quiet time of year to broach it, that's good. But also what Vinda said is, it's about sending that email and saying, this is something I want to discuss, and either suggesting dates or ask them to suggest dates, but try and so you're basically preparing them for it, and pick the best time of year to do it, and also the best time of day. I remember reading something about that as well, like obviously not 9:30 and not at 4:30. Maybe before lunch, you might get a pay rise before lunch. That might work. But yeah, so it's all about kind of knowing a good time of year to pick, and to give them time and say, I'd like to meet in a couple of weeks to talk about pay rises or pay reviews.
I think everyone in ThoughtWorks is now suddenly rescheduling all of their reviews to lunchtime for the next 4 weeks. Yeah, let's go to.
It's off the back of it. If you're in a large company, how do you know who you need to talk to negotiate? So like, if talent and HR is huge, how do you find out one person connection?
So the question is, if you're in a large organisation, how do you know who the person is to pick to go and have that negotiation conversation with? If it isn't obvious, I guess there's no kind of obvious person there. Has anyone had that experience or can share? Anyone else in the room? Yes.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, when you manage, unless you talk to them first, because of course they're the line man, they're supposed to be the person that can represent you on the tree. And so we encourage people just to talk straight to us. That sort of environment, larger organisation where you've got someone managing someone else, talk to the manager, the person is the same. And that's how it's worked for me, both as in the personal position where I've had to negotiate upwards, and also as a manager when I've had to manage people. So work that way. We will take it to HR. We know you. Hopefully, if they've been doing their work correctly, they know you and your talent better than HR.
Well, I think what I'm asking is, if there's only so much your line manager can do,
then they're not that good at management. they should be presenting your case, because they know the value you bring to the team. At the end of the day, HR will ask them, but after a lot, we have 360 reviews or things like that, which are processing. But yeah, it's a valid point, because sometimes you do get weak managers. In fact, you get weak managers a lot, unfortunately. And sometimes you might have to manage that a step upwards, if that makes sense. But that means building a relationship with someone you don't have day-to-day contact with, and that's not as easy as something like that. Of course, their employee is your boss, so that gets very, very difficult. But certainly, HR, I would argue, is a somewhat last resort, because they don't know you that well, and often they get brought in when things go pear-shaped for a large organisation. Well, no, ThoughtWorks is a different idea.
Just for people online, the first piece of advice from the room was, in a big organisation, actually you might not go first of all to the person who does have that kind of, who is the right person. You might go to a line manager or to someone kind of that you report to understand kind of whether they can be the person to represent, or is there another route to get to the people that you do need to talk to, which I appreciate in a big organisation can be often a challenge if that line manager is not as helpful. Anyone else experience that could help? No. Good luck.
Oh, great.
I mean, you work 12k more than you think you are.
The extension to the advice was then, unfortunately, sometimes it's about going around that person, which makes it stressful, but sometimes worth doing as well.
There's sometimes policies, it depends on the organisation. If you have a policy in your employee handbook, that's often the case with Catherine sort, then it might actually be defined in that, so it's well worth reading that sort of themes of kind of doorstop paper.
Question. So I'm really, really stoked to see not just ladies in the audience, which is great. This is about creating a movement and actually not just preaching to the choir. How can you be an advocate for someone within a review process or within the negotiation process? How can you prepare yourself if you know whether it's someone that's from a minority or whether it is a guy that actually is very nervous about negotiating? How can you deal for that on the other side of things?
So the question is, how can we be advocates, or how could somebody else be an advocate for that individual who might be preparing for a negotiation or for a review, who might be a minority, or actually might be a man who's just a really kind of nervous negotiator, and how can we be an advocate to any of us going into those situations?
I think having a really strong support network is again key. So it's not speaking on someone's behalf, but encouraging them to be able to have the confidence to negotiate for themselves, I think is really important. Whether that's being able to highlight the skill set that they have in order to negotiate, or giving them tools that they can then use to negotiate for themselves. I personally would think it was almost counterproductive to have someone speak on someone else's behalf in order to achieve something for them. I think it's much better to be able to help them through that process and get them to a point where they can do that themselves. But that's not to say helping or teaching isn't the right way to do it. I'd also ask where the insecurity around negotiation comes from, and if it's rooted in something that can be overcome as well.
Yeah, I agree. I was just actually thinking when you were talking about not speaking on people's behalf, but helping them kind of work through their processes. And I remember in my last job, I'm a bit of a geek, but I used to love helping my friends prep for interviews. And I noticed that whenever I did that, they always got the job. And I was like, oh, I'm quite good at this. But I think some of that is around obviously helping them prepare for it, but also empowering them in the sense that, they've practiced it with somebody, and they've kind of been preparing, and they've got somebody that has confidence in them, and so like Benjamin says, it's not about speaking on their behalf, but it's just about being there for them and listening to what their fears are, and trying to tease out what the real issues are, and then kind of trying to build up their confidence and help them to see what their value is. And I think, having that kind of friendship and that support, it might seem a bit woo, but I think it's very valuable. I know that if I was in my next negotiation, are we going to, if I'm prepped by any of you guys, I would be thinking about, all right, well, Finland thinks I'm good at that, so I must be good at it. And it's just that kind of confidence boost. So I think that's a useful way to kind of advocate, not in the sense that you're there right beside them, but just knowing that you've got people that have got your back, or you've got their back. Yeah, that's it.
Yes. I have a question for women who have a career break to raise their children, and then wanting to enter work, paid work. So, is there any tips to people in that bracket?
Yeah, and is that around money? Is that a money
No,
conversation?
it's not around money, because if you take a career break for a woman to raise the children, sometimes a lot of your confidence knocked down. Right. And then if you have a break for the 5 years, probably not too bad. But if you have many children, subsequent children, and then yes, you are being productive looking after them, but for example, for 10 years, some people go for 15 years. So how to, for a person to feel confident again to ask negotiate, because normally people who are in that position, they already sometimes have a master's degree already, and sometimes they're doing a lot of things during those productive years at home, but still those are not paid.
Great question. So the question is, for anyone that takes a career break for an extended period of time, and that might have been to have a family and raise a family, which often means that you might have been out of paid work for an extended period of time. But you are very qualified and you were using skills before you took that break in the workplace. How do you go about kind of preparing yourself and getting your confidence to a level where you can go and kind of negotiate on salary, but also on this is the value that I can bring, and I'm confident to bring it back. Anyone got some advice, tips on that? I think if we could crack that would be amazing. Any advice?
Cheers. I've never had any children, but I do know other people that have had children, and I think it will take much longer than tonight to address all the problems that women face going back to work after a career break for maternity. But I think what I've seen other people do, like my mum, for example, is like she was obviously really nervous before she went back to work after having loads of fun looking after us as children. And one thing that she did was like learn how to use a computer properly, because probably most people don't need to do that these days who would be looking for a job, but just showing that kind of willingness also will help your confidence, like you asked me your question, to just kind of get a bit back up to speed again, because I think a lot of people are aware of the issues and how difficult it is, so they'll respond quite positively if you put in a bit of effort.
Again, a huge topic, and I don't think we'll scratch the surface of it tonight. But there are a lot of amazing organisations out there that are, and I think this is something that is coming more and more to light, luckily now. So there's a great organisation based in Manchester called Pregnant and Screwed, which is I work with her.
Picture everything. Oh
yeah. Pregnant and Screwed is great, and it's a really good way of. It tells stories of women going back to work after being on maternity, and the different ways of coping with that. I think workplaces are getting better at being more flexible and accommodating to women that have taken career breaks. However, there's such a long way to go. I think being able to adjust your experience to what the market now demands is really key. And I actually think that's a key skill for negotiating in general, is not just taking your skill set at face value, but being able to understand how to mould it to shape the roles that you want is really crucial. Like transferable skills and being able to learn how to say what a soft skill brings to a hard skill, and those kind of things are really, really crucial.
Yeah, I was going to say is don't underestimate the skills that you have learnt in raising a family. They are immense. It's like being thrown into a battlefield. You're nodding. You've been there, right? Yeah.
Okay, I know what you mean.
Yeah. We're in the zone. So don't underestimate the skills that you've learned, and don't discount anything that you've learnt either. I think it's very important. And as Wendell said, there's lots of organisations out there that are set up especially to help women who've taken, career breaks to raise families, or just taking career breaks for whatever reason. So I would definitely, find your nearest one and throw yourself in the deep end. If you have maintained friendships with anybody at your work, rekindle them and pick them up and ask them what's going on in the company, what's going on in the industry, what has changed, what do I need to know? Because I think sometimes it's easy to think, I did my master's or degree, whatever, so many years ago, and it's easy to think that the entire world has moved on, and whilst that is true to a certain extent, you wouldn't have forgotten everything, and you might not need that much upskilling, but it's about getting the confidence, because you do kind of think, I spent all my time
dealing with kids not eating peas and changing nappies, you know, what can I do? But actually, you're probably a really good negotiator or a diplomat, you know, because you've learned those skills, and as Vinda says, it's about transferring them. Okay, well, if you took the kind of baby equation out of it, what is the skill that you've actually learned, and then how can that be useful in the place or the industry that you're trying to get back into? So it's always about trying to turn it on its head and make it a business skill. And you do have it, but it's about, you know, connecting the dots, I would say. So, and also don't be so hard on yourself when you go back, because it's a logistical nightmare. But you know, you eventually kind of work out what it is that you want to do. So you know, open yourself up to all sorts of possibilities, and you know, you might have a good employer that can see that, but it's about you showing that to them. You can't expect them to just know that you've got all these great skills because you've been out of the workplace for 10 years. You've got to show them that. Yeah, I wonder, just to extend that point, whether it's whether there's an opportunity with the same employer, or if you're starting again somewhere new, whether there's an opportunity to kind of give yourself a specific piece of work or project to demonstrate some of those skills and values, something that you know at the end is going to have a tangible result. Because sometimes it's just about reminding yourself that you've still got all those skills and you can still add value, and once you've got kind of that one kind of tick in the box, then you're like, okay, my confidence is back and I can go and assertively kind of talk about this to other employers or whoever it might be, and I can demonstrate it as a recent piece of work that I've just done as well. So maybe there's something in that as well.
Yeah, so just to add something to the same topic, I was listening to an interview on the radio the other day, and the speaker was a parenting coach, and she was actually, before she was in the media, some quite high position, so she was a very skilled person, and she was actually saying that she had taken, I think, 6 or 7 years off to raise her child, and her best tip was reevaluate not just where you are with the skills that you left from, just reevaluate what you want at that point in time, because maybe you will want to change completely your career, or maybe even if you want to go back to the same place, obviously you would have to get some more skills, but otherwise, as the girl said, once you've learned so many soft skills from raising the family, you probably have a lot more to give in another field that you would actually feel comfortable with. So that's about it.
I thought of another tip.
I'll just repeat that tip and then we'll come to your tip. So the tip in the room was to also kind of reevaluate where you are at that point in time when you're thinking about making the return. Think about kind of what you're looking for, and then think kind of not just about the skills that you kind of were demonstrating in the workplace before you took the leave, but all of the skills that you've gathered over kind of most recent times, whether they're soft skills or other, and then bring them all together and kind of align them with where you are at that point in time and what you're looking for, and henceforth. Thank you. What's your tip?
It was just basically adding on to that. That's really good advice. And from my experience, a lot of freelancers are like mums or not really young babies, but it's a good way to ease your way back into the workplace if you can get a bit of freelancing work, and also to reevaluate what you want. That you don't necessarily have to pick like the 9 to 5 grind. Not that it is, but it is.
Thank you. I'm just doing a quick time check. We've probably got time for a couple more questions, and we will look to wrap. So, yeah.
Mine was only a comment just to add
Okay.
into that. I mean, realistically, just to kind of tie into how useful having children and negotiating with children actually is. Michelle, your 4-year-old tip of giving them 2 choices, one of them is the one you actually want. That is 60% of my negotiations after about sort of 3/4 of the way in, so when we're getting towards the end of it. And that actually is a genuine negotiation. I do actually use it. I didn't realise I did that until you mentioned it, but there you go. So that is the sort of thing you kind of find. As the lady at the back mentioned, sometimes it is about reevaluating your purpose. I decided not to do corporate anymore in the standard sense, so I just obviously set on my own and went with that about 11 years ago. I said, I've never looked back, and that was my reevaluation. And of course, I'm talking about it from a guy's perspective, of course, this is like, I mean, more so to I was very lucky at the jobs that were able to children. I think that might be something you kind of bring to the table. Never underestimate the soft skills. Because like I said, I found out I've done something that other people kind of do in a very different context, which has kind of been interesting, but it genuinely is quite surprising.
Yeah, that's a great comment. So that was just to kind of extend the point. Don't underestimate the skills that you've learned in that time out, because to go back to the comment much earlier in the night about Michelle's 4-year-old and the negotiation techniques that she adopts with him. Actually, they're very similar. Those techniques can apply in so many different contexts, whether it's business or outside of business. And so just kind of, maybe do a reevaluation of those skills that you've adopted, and how can they be applied in different contexts and to different pieces of work. So thanks for that comment. Any other questions? Anything online? No, that's fine.
I'm a bloke. There's one insight therefore I can't have in this room, and that is how, because obviously I won't see things through female eyes from the point of view of negotiation. If you had to give us each 3 kind of takeaways that you'd want us as men to know, what would they be?
Oh, nice. Final question for the night is to the panel. What kind of, I guess maybe a key takeaway each, that if you wanted a man to know or to help you with or to be your advocate, what would your piece of advice or comment be for them to assist and support?
I think first of all it's to create as much as possible gender neutral environment where you don't overcompensate by lifting up women's confidence, but you do it for everyone so that people feel that they're treated equally is massively underrated and assumed to be the case when it really isn't. And I think just being self-aware enough to be able to frame your question the way you did, to say I can't see it through female eyes, is a good way of doing that. I'd also say being aware of how difficult it can be for women to have negotiations just in general when the struggle is harder getting into that workplace, onto that ladder, and to get to a point to negotiate. So the starting points are different, and being aware of that is really important too. But also throughout the year, if it gets to that review point, knowing that you've pushed someone far enough and have lifted them up, being gender neutral, to be able to be in a position of strength when they go into that negotiation.
I think a big tip would be to kind of create a safe space for women to be able to call things out if they think that something's not right. Because I think, well, I'm going to make an assumption that at work we see and are on the receiving end of so much stuff, but the fear of being the person to say, that's not on, holds a lot of women back. And if everybody's thinking that, it's just that elephant that's in the room, but it's only the elephant for the women and no one else. So I think some work around creating safe spaces for people to be able to say this isn't right, and to not have any repercussions, when calling things out.
My tip is don't interrupt, but also a serious tip is if you as a male think, you might not realise you have a lot of skills that you naturally were conditioned to learn as you grew up. So if you have the time and inclination, like to be a mentor, just casually, just if you know women as friends in the workplace, just offer advice. It's always welcome.
Thank you. I think that's. Oh, one final question.
It's not a question, but it's just added to that. You said don't interrupt. It's also look at the opinion of women as well. Like sort of black sheep in that company. You only take women out of almost men. And that's really weird. And we're sometimes in meetings. And I know when I have a one-to-one conversation, technical, it'll be very easy, I'll be listened to, but otherwise, there are these really battles of ideas between 2 or 3 people of the 10 in the room. It always feels like there's no room to get in there to say something.
which is quite weird. And I know I'm a vocal person if I want to, but I don't want to scream in a room just to make myself heard. It's kind of weird.
So it's facilitation of kind of fair time for everyone.
Not as in a framework.
Yeah, sure.
Because like obviously, if you're in a conversation, it's easy for you as maybe the leader of the group to look around to see if like the odd woman in the group keeps wanting to say something, but then backs down and then tries again. If it happens a few times and you see who is pushing the discussion and not allowing other people to speak, just give them a nudge in private. Ask her, and maybe after a while of repetition, maybe eventually they will do it on their own. I don't know.
Yes, that was just an extension or picking up on the don't interrupt, but also not just about not interrupting, make space and actively seek the opinion and voice of women in a discussion or in the room, so kind of pauses to let them have their voice, and also kind of just informally kind of been checking have we kind of supported that voice in the room, so